it is true that one of the really bothersome things for me in listening to Bart Ehrman is he presents the idea of how the New Testament was transmitted like the telephone game, where you start and you pass a story around, and by the time it gets to the other side, you're whispering it in someone's ear. It's been changed greatly. And Dan really takes that apart here, and I think he does so quite well.
Throughout the book, but especially he repeats in interviews and in the public square, is that of wholesale uncertainty about the original wording, a view that I believe is far more radical and skeptical than he really embraces. In light of comments such as these, the impression that many readers get from misquoting Jesus is that the transmission of the New Testament resembles the telephone game. And I suspect that many of you got that impression tonight when you hear that we don't have copies of copies of copies of copies until down the line. Well, the telephone game is a game that every child knows. It involves a line of people with the first one whispering some story to the ear of the next person, and that person whispers the story to the next on down the line. As the tale goes from person to person, it gets terribly garbled. The whole point of the telephone game, in fact, is to see how garbled it can get. There is no motivation whatsoever to get it right. By the time it gets to the last person, who repeats it out loud for the whole group, everybody has a good laugh. But the copying of the New Testament manuscripts is hardly like this parlor game. First of all, the message is passed on in writing, not orally. That would, of course, make for a pretty boring telephone game, or at least a pretty quiet one. Second, rather than having one line of transmission, there are multiple lines or streams of transmission. Third, textual critics don't rely on just the last person in each line, but they can interrogate several folks who are closer to the original source. Fourth, patristic writers are commenting on the text as it is going through its transmissional history. And when there are chronological gaps among the manuscripts, these writers often fill in those gaps by telling us what the text said in that place in their day.